Okay, I'm back. The publication of the transcribed interviews with Mr. Alexander Laurent was done solely to protect the copyright of our interview scripts. Its main purpose is to prevent translation into other languages from being wrong, inaccurate, and/or arbitrary, or without permission of the authors. Dear readers of English-speaking countries and nations, this interview was held in German and translated into English using an automatic translation program, deepl.com/translator. Therefore, it may happen that some sentences contain grammatical errors, some sentence structure is incorrect, commas are set incorrectly, and some expressions are inaccurate. If you are a media professional of the alternative media in your country, we would like to encourage you to correct any mistakes and improve the expression. Okay, so this is, if we find any grammatical mistakes, they give us a email to email them and get a password so they can change their mistakes. And if you are into that, I'll leave the PDF in the description so you can search out the email where you can email them. So we're just gonna go forward. All right, interview 1. Interview is starting. Transcription of the interview was made without any slip of the tongue and without long pauses. Emotional reactions were mostly not transcribed. All statements were optimized in their sentence structure without additions, changes, or omissions. Interviewer says, "Hello, dear viewers. Thank you very much for tuning in. I would like to welcome you to an interview which, due to its explosiveness, must be conducted completely unrecognized and outside the usual areas of defined channel and identification boundaries, out of competition, so to speak. An interview that will deal with old familiar questions about the intangible things of our universe, but above all about the influence on people from outside and inside. In other words, about the control of this planet and our consciousness. There are actually well-known questions, but our guests will come up with completely different answers, unusually different answers. Basically, this seems to be nothing new at first. If you look at television, the internet, books, Hollywood movies, or all the reports about secret machinations, about aliens, UFOs, secret societies, and dark forces, which are nowadays being thrown around our ears in all media, from shady to well-founded. We are constantly being supplied with and bombarded with information that has subtly created something in our collective consciousness, which, for example, proves the reality of visitors to foreign planets, keeps religious myths alive, explains and mystifies extrasensory phenomena, believes time travel is possible, or shows us the future feasibility of spaceships at the speed of light. Subliminally, according to our guests, all of this is slowly and creepingly planted into our consciousness for a specific purpose and kept there retrievable. The background for the media treatment of all these topics, which are often presented as secret or controversial, is of a completely different nature, according to our guest and interview partner, Mr. Alexander Laurent. In the following interview, Mr. Laurent will therefore break down and show the organized mechanics and completely different backgrounds for all the science fiction, and political topics that are widespread on television and books, films, or on the internet. How the majority of those contents and topics postulated by the mainstream or by the alternative media are presented as a complexly coordinated good-evil play, which primarily has the long-term mission of luring us into a new, technocratically organized and controlled future, with the global events staged from it, which will then be sold esoterically and religiously, spiritually as the expected golden age. I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Alexander Laurent. Alexander Laurent says, "Yes, hello, dear hostess. Thank you very much for inviting me for the interview, and thank you for letting me speak here." Interviewer says, "To uncover the events, you will not, however, bring the extraterrestrials into the realm of fantasy, but will explain how these beings exist in a completely different way than that which has been presented to us for years in the alternative or mainstream media. And how is this described by abducted people or people who are or were allegedly in contact with extraterrestrials? And how and why extraterrestrials actually influence us everywhere? In order to impressively present and prove this today, our guest published a novel under his pseudonym Alexander Laurent in April 2012, which was infiltrated as he says, cuckoo's egg in the established control order of the world in order to initiate an unavoidable process in the coming years, which would successfully expose the lackeys as well as the real ruling leaders of the world. A novel, however, which does not describe the situation in a conventional way or is a report from the scene of the ruling powers of this world, but rather by means of its narrative structure and metaphysics, hides and symbolically points out above all the hidden control mechanisms of our existence, and with some of its hidden oversized features will, as you say, create a process which is astonishing for every human being." So wordy. She is so wordy for saying, expose the bullshit. Expose the bullshit in ways that is not what we typically hear. That's what I would say. But maybe it's German and they speak different and it's very fancy and stuff. Pictorial. Now, as a pseudonym author of the novel The Apocalypse of God, a revelation. The Apocalypse of God, a revelation, which you published in April 2012 after a long period of time and using your pseudonym Alexander Laurent, you would like to do 1 or 3 interviews. On the one hand, you would like to answer the questions that have arisen since then from the readers of his book, especially 214 people to whom you sent your book anonymously and without being asked at the end of April 2012. In 3 interviews, you would like to discuss your novel, which you have deliberately kept symbolic and metaphysical, but you can only indirectly suggest how the novel functions as a cuckoo's egg, among other things, because the coded references in the book have provided and will continue to provide information about the future. However, the book with its symbolism and predictions is not the main subject of the interviews, but rather it is primarily intended to serve the viewer as a basis for proof or confirmation of everything that you will report here in the interviews. In other words, information for which the viewers of this interview can, if they wish, be the godfathers in the future. Well, this all sounds rather mysterious, especially because you say that on this basis, in the coming interviews, bit by bit, more detailed explanations and informations will be revealed by you, which completely describes the situation on our planet, backgrounds and causes for our situation, and you will also give news and information about a future potential humanity, a future existence, which until recently was only a possible future human existence, but which has now become manifest and unchangeable. As you say, a potential humanity intervening from a higher dimensional level, which is currently and practically since all times acting on us in a hidden way, irritating among other things the pragmatic dark powers on and around our planet and influencing their actions for a profound change. That sounds interesting, but also very complicated. What does it mean in plain language? What does it look like? Again, very wordy. More long words just to say, yes, please, I'm ready. Expose the bullshit. Okay. Alexander Laurent answers, yes, a very good day to you and the audience again. And thank you very much for this introduction, which was quite extensive. It was quite extensive, wasn't it? First of all, I would like to say at this point that some of the topics mentioned at the beginning of this interview may seem somewhat complex or incoherent to the viewer, only because they're making it so freaking wordy. Maybe if they could just say, expose the bullshit, it wouldn't be so complex. I guess they've got unlimited time. Okay. This is because the individual topics are in some respects new, more complex, and other contexts have to do with each other in a different way than we have known them so far. Topics that cannot be dealt with in one or two sentences without causing irritation or even misunderstandings. But the thicket will be lifted, I promised, since you introduced me as someone who has information about a future existence of mankind, a distant future, so to speak, and that mankind has an influence on us from there. I would like to emphasize at the beginning so that this influence is not misinterpreted by another mankind, that the generally valid definition of time in current science is very brittle and therefore subject to a very simplified analogy. I don't know what simplified means to these people. We shall see. I mean, I guess we are seeing. Anyways, how past, present, and future are considered to make time travel in four-dimensional space theoretically possible for the layman or even for some scientists, or that if time travel were to take place here in four-dimensional reality, it would be possible and it would always be a spatial and linear process that would sometimes produce temporal paradoxes. But this idea about time and space, as well as the obvious idea of time travel, is based on a theoretical error, which itself, on closer inspection, clearly reveals that the time travel, as we imagine it, cannot take place in four-dimensional space. They do not exist. The reason why we cannot time travel in our four-dimensional reality is not that we have not yet found a suitable method for time travel, but rather the structure and nature of our four-dimensional world, because this reality of ours needs a stable dimensional framework so that physical processes and physical consequences can take place in a linearly constant manner or can exist at all. If this were not the case, or if there were only the smallest possibility to travel into the past within this four-dimensional reality, our world would dissolve immediately, and even before one would even travel in time, or our world would never have existed. All he's saying is time travel as we know it is not possible. If we were to try and travel according to what we know and have heard in movies and stuff, this world would not exist because it's quite impossible, is what he's saying. Okay. Therefore, to make sure that this does not happen, we have a one dimension of time called time. It and its structure guarantee the stability of our four-dimensional reality. So time guarantees the stability of our four-dimensional reality, okay? So we cannot travel in time in our four-dimensional reality because we have not yet found out how to do it. But because we are but because we are not able to do so in the four-dimensional reality in which we exist. Okay, we can't do it. We cannot yet, or maybe we can't ever, because it's impossible, I guess. It simply cannot be traveled with matter into past or into the future, not as a human being or any being, not even a device. Due to the relativity of time, this seems to be possible. If a space traveler travels at almost the speed of light, and therefore the time of the outside world passes faster than inside the spaceship. However, this is not a time travel, but only an undertaken stretching of time, which creates a different time passing differently to each other inside and outside of the spaceship by a long journey with approximate speed of light. But the space traveler could not travel back. It is not possible to travel around in time, even into the future, i.e., to suddenly be in another time at a stroke. That is not possible. Even if esotericists or dreamy scientists do not agree, it is not possible. And that is good because the four-dimensional structure of our dimension level in which we find ourselves is what gives our world its very existential basis. This does not mean, however, that time in general cannot be influenced or changed in a guiding way, just not within our four-dimensional reality. From another dimensional level, from levels 4 to 6, a change or intervention in our time is possible, even partly compelling, even if this takes place predominantly passively and without direct influence, consequences of a so-called time paradox. Our time here can only be directly influenced from there, from the dimension level 4 to 6 mentioned above, even if the actual influencing order comes from the much higher dimensional level 7. These three dimension levels 1 to 4, 4 to 6, and dimension level 7 generate and maintain each other in a construct of casual condition and interaction from the potentiality of quantum mechanical probabilities. They exist, so to speak, from the respective other level are basically part of it and from it, which basically supports the existence of our seven-dimensional overall construct. So all the dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, 5, 6, and 7 make up a complete dimension, makes up the 7 dimensions. Yeah, obviously. Of course, 1 to 7 will make up a dimension. Interviewer asks, that sounds rather new and complicated. Could you explain to us very carefully the connections between dimensional levels and influence on lower dimensional levels? Alexander Laurent replies, well, that might be a bit too much for the viewer at this point, so I'd better start at the beginning very calmly, especially for people or for a humanity that does not yet know anything about dimensional or quantum dimensional interaction of existence. That is what I will call it here in a simplified way. For people today, the dimensional consequences of the subject of time cannot be correctly understood. The future, present, and past must not be understood with the conventional ideas and definitions of time, space, and matter, or in the way that is often portrayed in the lifestyle of current film and pop culture in connection with Journey Through Time. All these scientific definitions, conceptions, and ideas are the result of a misinterpretation of our four-dimensional world and the lack of knowledge about the interaction of space, matter, time, information, Consciousness, dimension level, interdimensionally acting, quantum mechanics, the world of possible events. If these attributes are taken into account, however, at least a journey through time purely for the term information can actually be realized, albeit under completely different conditions, influencing and affecting the targets and interveners. So for us here in dimension level 1 to 4, compared to the entities intervening from dimension level 4 to 6 or dimension level 7. This does not mean that we alone passively wait for the influences from other levels, but also implies that the influence of higher time dimension levels are also indirectly used and conditioned by us here. From our four-dimensional perspective, this means that there are always many possible futures in these higher dimension levels, potentially arising from the decisions and insights we make and experience within our four-dimensional world. This creates potential developmental processes that watch us now and then potentially influence us again, i.e., influence us and our time frame. Every human being could even make use of this mutual condition if she knew how to recognize and perceive the indications in order to implement a long-term advantage for mankind. In other words, to establish a very, very firm connection to this planet, to this potentiality. A so-called information interacting quantum substitution connection that works beyond the spatial dimension levels. For this purpose, reflections of temporal polarization, fractals in one's own life course can be used. This is called quantum echo. Interviewer says, so even I, who is not hearing this from you for the first time, still don't necessarily understand it. For me, all in all, this is a bit too much at once. Is there perhaps an approach or possibility to convey all this more easily so that every layman can understand it? Right? What the heck is he talking about? Alexander Laurent replies, it is clear that you don't understand it the very first time, and that is normal. It is something completely new for everyone. So do not despair. With time, it becomes clearer to anyone who listens attentively. For example, if you had understood exactly and completely what I have described in a comprehensible and applicable way, that is, if you were absolutely familiar with it so that you could explain it to other people, you would first have to explain that our existence is a seven-dimensional world and that we exist in the lowest four-dimensional dimension, level 1 to 4, consisting of 4 dimensions, and that the higher dimensional levels, i.e. dimensional levels 4 to 6 and dimensional level 7, no longer have any space at all with a so-called necessarily forward-running time, that there is also no reality there in which there is a first, second, third dimension, and that the fifth and sixth dimension in inverted commas are only an extended dimension of time, and a relationship similar to the second and third spatial dimensions to the first spatial dimension, and the sixth is also a kind of temporal consciousness dimension. And you would have to mention that the seventh dimension is already a dimension level for itself, which completely dominates the dimension and dimension levels below it, and at the same time, a feeding information dimension for it, in which all lower dimensions and dimension levels are bundled, closed off, housed, and so to speak, controlled by it, which makes this seventh dimension or dimension level almost unassailable. That is, from the lower dimension level, all this is not physical teaching knowledge, not knowledge from the school or university, but secret knowledge. The nature of our seven-dimensional dimensional matter, space-time, consciousness, information, existence in which we all live and exist. So he is just saying in a very complicated way that we are all built. This seventh dimension is built up, that's what I said before, from the lower dimensions. So if you have an understanding, if you're in the first dimension and all you have is understanding of first dimension, that's all you can see. And then you learn more, and then your consciousness grows, and then you broaden your consciousness until you have more knowledge, and you could say you've gone into a second dimension. And because you've learned something new, people who didn't learn it can't see what you've learned yet. So the same like for the third dimension. So you learn something new again. So your consciousness is based from level 1, level 2, level 3 consciousness or dimension. And you could see everything under everything you've learned. But those under you who have not learned any of it yet cannot see what you see. They can't see past that yet. So it's a building up of consciousness, of knowledge. So once you are in the seventh dimension, you see it all. But people in the fourth dimension can't see what the seventh dimension people see because they have not learned it yet. So they cannot see it yet. So that's what they're saying, but they're all intertwined because you can't have 7 dimensions without a buildup of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knowledge. It's all built up to make the 7th dimension. Yeah, that's what he's trying to say, but in a very convoluted, complex way, because it's being translated from German, I guess. Okay, anyways. Or maybe he talks like that so it could seem all, I'm so much smarter than thou. You're just stupid. No, I don't think he's doing that. Maybe, but I'm gonna assume there's no weird ego. I look down on you because you don't know anything. I'm gonna assume that there's none of that going on. So, interviewer asks, so a limited world with 7 dimensions that are connected to each other, but only indirectly? I'm gonna stop here because I'm gonna stop in a half hour. In 3 minutes, because this video is getting too long. Okay, Alexander Laurent answers, yes, there are 3 dimension levels in our 7-dimensional universe. Levels 1 to 4 are made up of the dimensions 1, 2, 3, and 4. Dimension level 4 to 6 are made up of dimensions 4, 5, and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the 4th dimension, and then the next level up is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's just saying what I said earlier. Dimension levels 4 to 6 are made up of dimensions 4, 5, and 6, and the last dimension level has only one dimension, the 7th dimension, which is both a full and independent dimension level, the highest within the 7-dimensional world. The highest 7-dimension level is a very special dimension level, which almost invisibly dominates the others. So 7 dominates the lower ones. Then there are also passively switched interweaving or connecting levels between the dimension levels. For example, dimension level 1 to 4, i.e. our own, shares one dimension with dimension levels 4 to 6, the 4th. interviewer asks, okay, so the individual sections of the seven-dimensional world are divided into levels, dimension level 1 to 4 and dimension level 4 to 6, and the highest and ruling one is dimension 7, which is also an independent dimension level. Okay, I'm gonna pause there and we'll see what Alexander says in the next video.